Here we are in 1171 in Empires of the Middle Ages. I just wanted to catch a couple of quick things. The Greeks went heretical, and the Byzantines have conquered them back and started trying to convert them. And the Poles continued a diplomatic assault. They have a good diplomatic leader, lost some administrative ability, who got a successful diplomatic conquest of Smolensk, but the Byzantines challenged this in religious court, and they were able to collect enough points between their bonus for it being an Orthodox territory, their own points. The Germans supported them in this, not wanting the Poles to become any stronger. The Poles are, right on their border, and they're considering taking Brandenburg now that it's considered German, now that it's a more Germanic language. But also, the Britons supported the Byzantines in order to maintain their position in the Byzantine court. They were told, you're going to hit the road if you don't. And France would have allowed them, but that's a slight disadvantage, so they went ahead with the vote because it didn't really matter. The Poles obviously don't have anything to do about it, so they tried to invade and failed. Now we're at 1176. The Germans died airless, lost Saxony, Northumbria, and Ireland in that process. But the old British and then Norse dynasty also died airless. They're out of the game now. They had no territory. All their claims were gone. All they could do is be a pretender under the rules. The French turned, recovered from their taxation, and then are starting to convert Portugal to Catholicism. 1181. The Poles have conquered pretty much all the territory that the Byzantines could not defend, and they've got claims to all of it now. Byzantines aren't thrilled, but they're busy trying to subjugate the Greeks and make them good Orthodox. The Venetians picked up a hell of a ruler, 993, and after some failed rulings before he came into play, they're now conquered Rome, and they're going to prepare themselves to convert them again. And the French, the Germans ruled and are getting their economy back into place. They've got a very good administrator, 293. Whereas the French, who still have their 555 leader, spent a pile of money, and they've almost completely converted Portugal. Sorry about the shakiness there. I know that's bad. 1186 with the pleasant sounds of 9:15 p.m. and the construction location behind me. Byzantines had a leader dies airless and lost more of their territory. They lost all the claims in Russia, and they lost Sicily, and they lost some of the Balkan territories. They're getting to be much more the size that you'd expect them to be, which is still pretty potent, but it's only their heartland that really is worth anything, but victory point wise the rest of it is of some value. Germans ruled. French finished the conquest or the conversion of Portugal, and the Lombards worked on Rome, but they got a leader dies airless. They've got missionary fervor, so it's actually pretty easy for them, but their hand and the leader dies airless didn't make it that easy. They went through a number of leaders, actually, ending up with a 525, which isn't bad, but they didn't succeed in converting it, which one would have expected them to have done with a full hand of cards. For victory points for that, and this mess is hardly readable, but the Byzantines have 35, the Poles have 25, the Germans 10, the French 20, and the defunct English have 5. I'll scratch them out. They're not going to win the game. Alright. 1191, and the Poles opened things up by attacking Wallachia and Bulgaria. The Byzantines allowed them to fall probably foolishly, because they have a good leader in place, and they went back and took them. Not that either one was, they were both neutral at the time, so I don't think, they didn't have a defensive option on them, but they're just really pissed at the Polish expansion at this point, and are going to take it out on them and going war bunny. Unfortunately, their home areas are not very wealthy at this point. They did spend a little time ruling, and their cash reserves are not really that much bigger than what Poland has. The Germans continue to rule and are continuing to pile up ridiculous amounts of cash. I've never seen Germany be the wealth in this way. It's usually the Byzantines who manage it, so it's kind of an interesting twist. And the Venetians converted Rome and did a diplomatic conquest on Naples, so they're beginning to form themselves a nice little kingdom there. 1196, the only really exciting thing, or non-exciting thing that actually happened, the Byzantines chose not to attack the Poles any further, because the Poles held some cards, and the Byzantines just don't see stretching their empire in an attack in that way, losing what little cash they still have. I mean, they've got a decent amount, but it's not enough to start frittering away. So instead they conquered Armenia and began a reconquest on Sicily. We're at 1201. 1201 is an interesting year because as soon as we pass the 1200 mark, two things become available. Epidemics can become the Black Plague, which definitely has an effect on Europe, but nowhere near what you'd expect it to. It really kind of has a one-time swing from Constantinople and Venice, just wiping social states down a significant amount, but it's recovered from within a few years, which I don't think accurately reflects what happened. And the second one is the Mongols can come, and they, when they do come, show up as a magnate and are very, very potent. 9 strength, they have 10 cards instead of the normal 5. And they'd be coming in from around here and pretty much wiping out the East. I've seen them just not show up in games or fizzle. So we can see what happens. Major actions of any kind. For the most part, nobody did anything too serious. The Italians managed to convert Naples. Byzantines took Sicily back. Poles continued with diplomacy against the Byzantines, but to no real effect. The Germans are becoming quite a potent moneymaker, which they already were, but they've become much more solid since then. And the French are also beginning to solidify their economic position with good leadership. First chance they got, we did actually have a Mongol incursion. Came in through the steppes to Wallachia, attacked into Volhynia, and then down to Bulgaria. Then at Adrianople, the Byzantines stopped it. Both the Poles and Byzantines fought against them. The Poles lost their leader and are down to a wonderful military leader of a 155. But the Mongols were stopped on this attack, so I'll replace those markers. 1206, and we had a few interesting things happen. Probably, well, the Poles went and got a dynastic inheritance, which gave them Wallachia and Bulgaria back. They also got claims to the rest of the Balkan Slavics. The Germans pulled in a total of $21 in taxes, which is the biggest we've seen this game yet. Remember, the Byzantines hit around 17 as their max, which is sort of their natural max, but the German Empire is just so big right now, and it actually can still expand in German language areas. The French had the bonus, and I'm beginning to consider it a bonus at this point, even though it seems like a bad event, of a an outbreak of heresy in Aquitaine. Why it's a bonus? Well, one, their leader died and they got an absolute god. Anyone with 9/9 on those first two. The combat administration combination is just amazing. Kind of guy who can destabilize the game. But why it's a bonus is you can get 5 victory points for wiping out heretics. They're victory points that don't go away, so it's kind of cool to have these outbreaks, because you're not going to make 5 victory points in 10 years, usually. 5 victory points that last to the end of the game. So it's actually maybe the best event in the deck. And I'm beginning to think that the Germans are foolish for not trying to court it, because they could handle such easily as well. And follow-ups after that, what happened? The Byzantines retook Cilicia. At great expense. Asia is now negative. They've got like $3 in taxation total. That's about it. 1211. Major things that happened. The Germans had a leader dies airless event. They ended up losing Provence and Friesland, but they regained both, got the claim to Provence. Byzantines advanced into Bulgaria and grabbed the claim to that. The Italians went into Apulia and started their conversion of that. They're almost done. And the French finished their conversion of Aquitaine. Points on conversions. This just keeps getting uglier and uglier. Byzantines are at 35, the Poles are at 25, Germans at 10, France at 25, and Italy at 10. So you can see there's a definite collection. People are realizing that these are worth having and going about getting them. 1216, and the only exciting things that happened, well, the Italians managed to convert Apulia. So now the entirety of Italy, other than Sicily and the islands, is Roman Catholic and under their control. The French took this opportunity to attack Provence. They went last and decided to open up the big can of worms that's Germany. This may be a huge mistake. We'll see what that ends up as, but looks dangerous to me to mess with anything with that much money. Here in 1206 we see a Mongol incursion which swept through the Balkans and has currently been attacking Venice. They got a total of 0 on Venice. The Italian player doesn't want to risk anything. Granted, it takes 4 successes, but they don't even want the social state decreased. They don't have a great leader. So the best thing to do for them was to defend in each case, and they spent 4 of their 5 cards defending against that. The Mongols get 10 cards instead of the 5 a normal magnate gets. So they really shook things up with that, at least in terms of the Italians. But they also took a lot of Byzantine territories, which could now end up in Polish hands. The Germans launched their counterattack against the French, and all they did was take Normandy. Then their ruler died, and they got someone who's very good at administration. So rather than trying to wear down the French money completely, they ruled some of their territories. Now it's going to be the French turn, and they just drew an epidemic card, which since it's after 1200 is the Black Plague. Black Plague wasn't that impressive. It certainly hurt Constantinople, but the area around it was already pretty poor. It automatically spreads to Venice, which of course makes the Italians' job a little harder. And from there it actually managed to get into Rome and Tuscany. But out of there, it couldn't go any further. Things like Lombardy didn't, are poor enough. So the fact that the Mediterranean area is still in pretty bad shape, even with the addition of an Italian player, meant that it didn't spread very far. I've still got the French player to play, and then we'll wrap this. And the French reaction was massive. Remember, they've got a really amazing leader in 993. They were stopped by the one card which the Germans held. Basically, wherever the Germans wanted to defend, they could defend once. They could have held more cards and made this harder. but eventually swept into Lorraine, Swabia, and Franconia. That leaves only two areas, actually only one area in Germany itself that produces money, which is Bavaria. It leaves very few spaces that remain for a German empire to still exist fully. However, the Germans will get a turn, and the key to these kind of attacks is you have to wipe them out in one turn. Otherwise, they get to come back and they have all this money and they take all their territories back, and this just becomes this horrible drain on both sides. But one nice effect that it had, at least from the French point of view, is all their northern territories are now in unrest because they're not connected, and they can't launch any attacks out of them. So they're basically going to be fighting in Germany's homeland here, unless the Germans want to attack out of Burgundy. That would be really, really unwise, though, because they could end up losing their kingdom in that case. So this is going to be an ugly war, there's no question. Alright, that's it for... I guess we end up at... I think it's going to be 12:21 at the end of this.